Thank you. Thank you. It gives me great pleasure to talk about cycling and social inclusion for BME groups in Greater Manchester. My background is an early retired local government officer and town planner. I've had the good fortune since then to join the Manchester Dragon Cycling Club, which combines my need for physical activity with the support of the environment. During my career in Greater Manchester, I was involved in significant planning work, such as the expansion of Manchester Airport and in European funding bids. But now I'm taking a general interest in planning matters, both domestic and overseas. I think you've all heard a couple of research presentations, which have been very interesting. These have been involved on extensive research literature into cycling and social inclusion. I mean, we've heard about Haley's work down in London and Mohammed citing the landscape review, but there does still seem to be a dearth or a lack of research into hard to research groups, reach groups. For example, what about the ethnic Chinese in Britain? What are their motivations and dispositions towards various modes of transport? I'm curious to know about how this compares with the Chinese in China. There's a number of residents in Chinese in Great Britain, indeed Greater Manchester is relatively small. It isn't opposite to look at the lack of presence in casualty, accident statistics or sporting representation on Team B. But there does seem to be plenty of scope for qualitative research. My aim here is to make use of my access to a BME cycling group, perhaps a unique service backed by a Chinese community centre, the Y-In Society, that aims to increase community engagement and the well-being of its members and to empower its members as well. Call it serendipity or an opportunistic approach or some combination of the two. But this presentation, I hope to shed some exploratory insights into this area of the research landscape. Mammals, or middle-aged males in Lycra, and Haley's alluded to that, have been seen as a big success story for recreational cycling. In the UK, it's not been the Harley Davidson or the electric guitar, but the humble bicycle that's enjoyed a renaissance as adolescence evolves into full-blown middle-age crisis. Only the boys' toys aren't so humble, because I've heard of £3,000 racing bikes being nicked outside a cafe on a Sunday as Mr. Mammal enjoys his brunch. But however, I think the Mammal story is overall a good one because they've got fresh air, fitness, ego, wellness, all congruent with a visible presence of cyclists on our roads. Even if the motive is somewhat driven by sporting enthusiasm, the Tour de France, British success in the Olympics, etc., rather than environmental considerations. However, age-friendly e-cycling seems to be poised for a boost. When I visited my local bike shop to pick up a folding bike for my city centre commute, because I do some part-time work for a charity, I was pointed to the e-bike. Obviously, they could see me shambling in some kind of decrepitude and maybe heard my knees rustling like a packet of crisps, as they sometimes do. But the point is this, I decided to carry on under my own steam. I purchased a Brompton 6-speed, which allows me to accelerate from the traffic lights. Even though I live in a flat area of Manchester, but I don't really see a push in the official agenda for e-cycling or e-bikes yet in the active aging program. And I think that it's possible that as the government pursues the electric car agenda, there may be a pickup on the back of that for e-cycling. However, we've been talking about the relatively privileged so far. And what I would like to focus on is what about the underprivileged? What about the working class and the BME groups who are have language barriers or might not quite be comfortable with the British social mores and customs, as Mohammed alluded to. I see this as the presenting problem to investigate the absence of adequate representation of BME cyclists in Manchester. How do we investigate this? Are there significant numbers? No. So probably an anthropological or ethnographic approach by working within the confines of one such group, the Manchester Dragon Cycling Club. So what do we mean by the barriers to cycling and social inclusion? For the mainstream population, there are general barriers: the traffic, personal safety, bad weather, costs, inconvenience, distances. And I think we heard Hayley addressing those. But the balance that equation with the perceived benefits: health, well-being, losing weight, economical, fun. We must mention the fun factor. In my case, a second childhood springs to mind, fond memories of cycling as a boy. But the Chinese, they don't have that, of course. And for the BME Chinese, there are additional barriers, such as language and cultural factors. What do we mean by that? You may think you don't need English language to cycle any more than you need English to drive a car. But there does seem to be a perception that a cycling has an air of vulnerability, a more hostile environment than the use of English is actually more important. You're not sealed away in a self-contained bubble as in a four-wheel vehicle. There is the fear of harassment, as Hayley alluded to. Cultural sensitivity is another factor. Driving a car is an individualistic behavior, but for cycling, it lends itself to the Chinese group behavior, collective behavior, traveling in convoy. I may have a video to illustrate that later. As a result, cycling has emerged for BMEs in Manchester as a way to reduce social isolation, to increase community engagement through this group, the BME cycling group. The group by and large lack English language skills, but actively wish to promote social inclusion in order to meet English friends. It reduces their loneliness and social isolation. I know that word is ambiguous at the moment, that phrase, social isolation, but it increases their personal confidence. Ontology, I think it comes to this point that we see things differently in the cycling club. Cycling becomes a means to social inclusion. For mammals, it's a way of getting away from society, to get to reach the countryside. So let me talk a bit about the MDCC, the Manchester Dragon Cycling Club. It seems to be, in my view, a unique solution set up in partnership with the Y-In Society, which is a large registered charity, the largest Chinese community centre in Britain, and based in Manchester, and in fact has celebrated a 30-year anniversary last year. It's an organisation that empowers the BME groups and supports them, particularly in the northwest of England. However, the cycling club, MDCC, was only set up just 5 years ago, in June 2015. It's a group that's self-run with no paid staff. The volunteers meet as a committee on a regular basis to discuss issues such as the name. Let me talk about the name. Believe it or not, there is another MDCC, and that's the Mid-Devon Cycling Club. We have asked for and received their permission to use the same initials. MDCC supports recreational cycling, and now the numbers are around 20 members. It's balanced roughly half and half between males and females. Its impetus comes from people who enjoy cycling, but see the wider social benefits for the Chinese community. And as there are many wider benefits, as Mohammed mentioned, the landscape review refers that BME people are missing out. So it relies on the support of YIN for the premises, resources, but the club is run autonomously, devising its own program of activities and actions. The activities, and I'm not sure if I've got all of them, but from my observations, regular meetings and cycle rides. 60 in the year to June 2019. Obviously, we've got the hiatus now because of COVID-19. They do training and confidence building. Bear in mind that some of these, well, they migrated from other countries, places like Hong Kong, where there isn't a culture of cycling as a child amongst a high density population. So some of the ladies were training in the tennis courts near the center. It's a bit like teaching adults, you know, how to swim. They've got to learn to balance on their bikes. Bicycle repair shops we run on Tuesdays, where the volunteers work on preparing bikes for unemployed and migrants, you know, who are looking for jobs and need transport. We've got an inspirational member, a Chinese Olympian, who's obviously shielding at this point. He was an Olympian in the 60s, representing Hong Kong. Very encouraging member of the group. Social identity is a big factor, very important. An insistence on uniforms and logos to be worn on during activities. There's a big sense of belonging. The group rides are done in convoy. And there's also an annual cycling award given to in the group it's called the Dr. Sylvia Sham Cup, which is an honor of a previous CEO of YIN Society who tragically died prematurely of cancer. So we also have social eating and friendships, where there would be an annual event to have a meal together. And so social media now has become, has been good as well. There's a WhatsApp group, which is quite active. Can I just move to the next stage, which is the video? And they say a picture's worth 1,000 words. I think a video can tell a story too, and this video might give an understanding of some of the points that I've raised about BME cycling and social inclusion. If the technology allows, I'll play it. Okay, good. Well, in conclusion, it is early days, but I believe that the model shown here of clubs like MDCC, in this case supported by the YIN Society, an established charity, offers a unique solution to cycling and social inclusion of BME groups. And I think Hayley's alluded that there is a way forward to support for demographic groups. There is potential to develop a critical mass of cycling and indeed active travel amongst BME communities using this model. But of course, further research is needed. Ethnographic and also possibly a more expensive option, the use of action research could formulate case study material of how to develop cycling for BMEs and hard to reach groups in Britain. Inevitably, mistakes will be made, but it is trial and error. But I do sense that there is a strong interest from the academic community, possibly for international students and scholars in the universities pursuing research degrees. Thank you. I apologize for the hiatus at the beginning due to the technology, but any questions at the end? Thank you. Thank you very much.